This segment of Farm Talk here on Power 106 FM is brought to you by the National Irrigation Commission, making the difference in agriculture. So this morning we're turning the spotlight on the Irrigation Act of 1949, which gives the National Irrigation Commission the authority to operate and provide various services. But did you know that there are certain offenses and obstruction that take place regularly, that the National Irrigation Commission, they have to get involved in these situations as they seek to protect their works? Well, we're joined by Susan Gordon, who is legal officer with the National Irrigation Commission, to help us to get a better understanding of the NIC and the Irrigation Act of 1949 and those offenses under the Act and what our responsibilities are as citizens. Ms. Susan Gordon, good morning and welcome to Farm Talk. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. Good morning to you out there. Good morning to the entire Jamaica. Thanks for having us here.
It is a pleasure to have you on. And the reason I'm so excited about this is that we don't very often on this program get to speak about legal issues having to do with the use of this commodity, water, that is so important to us all. And particularly now, as we face issues having to do with climate change, two very important conferences taking place at this time. One right here in Jamaica at the Jamaica Conference Center in terms of disaster risk reduction, and the other, of course, COP26. But both of them, I'm certain that the National Irrigation Commission will be sitting up and paying attention to. And so in that context, it is good to be having this kind of conversation this morning as well. So I want to start by, first of all, just touching a little bit on the National Irrigation Commission and what your overall objective is.
Well, Althea, as you quite rightly said, our main objective is really to manage, right? To operate and to maintain and, expand existing and future irrigation schemes and systems, as of course the government of Jamaica may establish across the island. But as you can imagine, most of the southern parishes are where we would consider our breadbasket. So we are mainly located along the southern parishes, and we have a branch in northern parish. And all of these systems are geared at providing our customers, a large proportion of which really would be farmers, with irrigated water, so that we can enhance that food security well, you didn't mention food security, but you mentioned climate and the climate change. But as you know, the climate does affect food production. So all of our objective is really to provide them with this water so that we can enhance food security.
Okay. Now, that being said, there is always some kind of legislation that guides the process. So can you just tell us what that piece of legislation is that guides the functions of the National Irrigation Commission in irrigation works?
Well, the legislation is actually the Irrigation Act. That's our principal legislation, right? And as you said, it guides the activities, and it vests in the NIC the authority to carry out some of our objectives, which we mentioned just now.
Mm-hmm. I want to break this down even further, because we hear the term irrigation works, but what are irrigation works?
Well, I'm very happy you asked, because it covers a number of things, and I really hope some of our listeners may not know this, right? Irrigation works refer to description of building, structure, even excavation, wells, tanks, reservoirs, dams, embankments, sluices, aqueducts, canals, trenches, pipes, cable, wire, pump, appliances. So it's just about any apparatus used or proposed, or anything that we intend to use in connection with generation, conservation, storage, or supply and distribution of power for any irrigation purpose. So that is how wide it works. Yes.
I'm just amazed at how wide it is. It therefore means that when we talk about trespassing on the property or the irrigation works, it means that if people do anything in terms of touching the trenching, the pipes, the cables, appliances, all of these constitute an offense against the National Irrigation Commission.
Exactly. I mean, treating them without the authority to do so, yes, it does.
Wow. So, and that leads us then to the very important question of what are some of the powers given to the National Irrigation Commission under the NIC, under the Irrigation Act?
Okay, so the NIC has several powers. It has a power to acquire lands, right? And these lands will be declared under the irrigation schemes that we kind of mentioned that we are in different parishes, so we would have set up schemes in these different parishes or different regions because some straddle several parishes. It has the power to reclaim and drain land, to alter any water course, right? To install drains, pipes, or remove even banks. So we don't need commercial banks now. River banks and soil, that kind of thing. To clean any water course and clear vegetation, trees, soil, or any obstacle which obstructs or impedes the natural flow of water in an irrigation area. It also has the power to instruct an occupier of land within an irrigation area to maintain the drains and to clean the drains and to keep them free from obstacles. But it does so via a notice. It would regularly serve a notice on that person before it instructs the person to do so. So these are some of the powers. Yeah.
All right. So quite a lot of powers actually, and the part of that is seeking to ensure that this which you have worked so hard to put in terms of the infrastructural development to bring water into these areas, that is protected. So we also talk about schemes when it comes to the National Irrigation Commission, and we make that reference. What are we talking about?
Okay, so we're really talking about systems operated and maintained for the collection and the impounding and the whole distribution of water for irrigation within the irrigation area, right? And as I mentioned before, the NIC has established irrigation schemes all over the island. And so when we talk about schemes, so when we talk about the irrigation area, we're actually talking about the area within these schemes, right? And some of them are, most of them are outside of the corporate area because, we're not in the corporate area. The farming is very minimal. So some of these schemes would have been like the Mid-Carrington irrigation schemes, St. Dorothy Plain, which I understand St. Dorothy was once a parish. I'm not so sure.
Yes, it actually was.
Right, so, and that's, in St. Catherine. Hounslow is also another area that's in Elizabeth, Racco, Yallis, Seven Rivers, which is, in Wigo. So we covered nicely a lot of our southern plains in terms of establishing irrigation schemes there. And
it continues.
Right, it continues, right, because that's as a part of our mandate. And these schemes, from these schemes, we're able to use the land to develop and establish various projects. Some of them are now in the making. Some of them have been established before. But all of it is really geared, towards improving the agricultural sector, right, by making just water more accessible to the farmers right across the length and breadth of Jamaica. So as we would want to believe, happy farmers, happy Jamaica.
I quite agree with you. That is why we do this program, because we have come to that realization that if we can keep our farmers and our fisher folk happy, then it makes a world of difference in terms of how the rest of us are fed. And just before we take the break, I know that you have a couple of tips that you want to share with us, so you can give us one now and then when we a little bit later on, you can give us another.
Well, one tip is that we want to say that NIC does all in its power to get irrigation water to its customers to enhance food security.
All right, so we take the break, and then when we come back, there are some other questions that I want to throw at you. Talk here on Power 106 FM, and what a pleasure it is to have joining us this morning Suzanne Gordon, Legal Officer of the National Irrigation Commission. As I was saying to her earlier, we don't very often get to discuss these kinds of legal issues on the program, but these are issues that the farmers have to understand because they are using, quite a number of them, the services of the National Irrigation Commission. So she has walked us through the National Irrigation Commission's main objectives, and she has spoken about the legislation that guides the functions of the National Irrigation Commission. That is the Irrigation Act, which she says is the principal legislation that guides the activities of the NIC. But we do have another couple of questions that we want to throw at her this morning. And one of these is whether or not there are challenges. Do agents face challenges in carrying out their duties? So, for example, are there situations where you find landowners who are perhaps saying a trespass for my land?
Well, okay, yes, they do. They do face challenges from time to time, but, our agents can always rely on the Act, to continue their work. In fact, Section 43, makes it an offense if members of the public obstruct the officers from carrying out their duties under the Act. For example, trying to prevent them from actually doing their duties coming onto the land, if it is that they have that lawful authority to do so. And I'm going to, before I just complete what the offense is, tell you exactly how this authority is established. So, it's an offense. The offense is a summary offense, and it carries a fine of $10,000 or imprisonment for any term not exceeding 12 months, which is a year. I mean, who wants to be in prison just to block someone from doing their work, right?
Right.
And this offender is found liable in a court of law. So we say, yes, we rely on the Act, and Section 262 gives NIC the power to enter onto lands. We spoke about entering on lands within the irrigation area, but the Act also gives us the power to enter on lands outside of the irrigation area.
Okay, let me stop you there, because I think it is important for us to understand how it is that this can be done. Can you just turn up on somebody's property at any time, or do you have to give them notice?
Well, that is, as good corporate citizens, we do follow the law, and the basic things that we would first have to give them written notice, 14 days, and we give them 14 days, and also the landowner could give us his consent within 7 days if we tell them that we want to come on the land. So any of these will do. We give them for the NIC.
You can't just turn up. You have to. Yes.
Right, right. And in particular, for example, when we say land outside the irrigation area, we're talking about land which intersects a water course. Because as you know, I'm not going to go into any of the engineering aspect of it, but our service is usually linked to some main natural water course, which is geographically fairly close by for us to harness some of the water. So we are particularly interested in, even the areas outside of the irrigation area, it usually intersects a water course. So it's not necessarily anybody's land, but even so, if that is the case, we would also provide them with written notice before.
Wow. Very important, because as you say, there are certain aspects of the law that the farmers themselves need to understand, the landowners need to understand, and of course there are certain rights that the National Irrigation Commission has. And you always observe under the law. You mentioned the $10,000 fine. Doesn't seem like a lot. Has there been any any thought of adjustments being made over the years, or have you found that it is not necessary so to do because you have enjoyed good cooperation from the citizens in this regard?
Well, we have enjoyed good cooperation for the most part. We do view that $10,000. Of course, that is not necessarily the maximum amount on the or ask, but $10,000 right now. $10,000 right now. It's small, probably like a supermarket visit for some people. But so we are actually working on that, and you know how it is with the law. It takes some time to get it amended, and our act is 70 odd years old, right? So so that's one of the things that we'll be looking at in increasing the fines. But for the most part, we receive minimal claims and minimal incidents concerning people obstructing our agents, notwithstanding.
But that also begs the question of whether or not there have been claims brought against the NIC while you're carrying out the works, and how effectively the law has dealt with these kinds of actions.
Well, there should be actually minimal or even none, right? Because the truth is that our legislation, the framers of our legislation, I think they knew it would be self-defeating if the precious resources is used to out fires, as we would say, to settle court matters, instead of putting, as they would say in Jamaica, putting out a pot on the fire, you eat a food. In other words, we are busy trying to provide irrigation water, irrigated water, so that farmers can get it, so that we can enhance our food security and all of that. So our legislation is kind of a little ironclad to ensure that we don't get too much resistance for us to be deviating from doing our main objectives, to be fighting court claims and all of that. So it does allow us
You would much rather be spending your time and your resources getting the infrastructure in, and I think that is something that we need to help our people to understand, that what you're seeking to do is developmental, and so we really ought to cooperate. I'm almost out of time, but I'm trying to squeeze one final question in, and I'm hoping that at some other point in time you can come back to us and pick up on some of these issues. But the fact that your infrastructure, so to speak, is accessible to the public, I think one of the questions that I wanted to answer before you leave us is, what are the consequences if an individual damages or tampers with them?
Okay, well, as I said, several consequences. Members could be liable to pay fines up to $100,000 in some cases, and they could be imprisoned up to 3 years or even both. And when we talk about damage to infrastructure, we're talking about basically blocking up and squatting, for example, on canal reserves, right? That is considered an obstacle, and many persons don't know this. And the NIC has the power to clear this obstacle under the law. Breaking or cutting gates and valves that we have on our canals. The average person may not even relate an NIC pipe being burst by heavy equipment to a damage to works, but it is, because these infrastructures, they cost money. Right?
You all have your hands full, because I see people doing all kinds of things in those NIC canals. They bathe, they wash, all sorts of things, and I suppose that is one of the reasons as well why you always tell people, listen, this is not treated water, So I think you're going to have to come back and extend this conversation with us. What a pleasure it was to have you on this morning. Thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you for having us.
All right, take care. Susan Gordon there, and she is legal officer with the National Irrigation Commission. Just going through some of the issues that we need to know in terms of the Irrigation Act of 1949 and the powers that it gives the National Irrigation Commission to operate and provide various services.